you said very early on that you noticed that your brother was treated differently. When did you start to notice that? And then what did that initially look like for you? Because as a big sister and being in that role, I know my emotional response would look very different than it would today. So how have you grown in that aspect?
Yes, that's a great question. I think for how I've grown, I think it's learning to harness some of those emotions, and that sadness and pain and frustration. Isolation too is a huge thing for autism families, feeling that sense of ostracization and isolation from the community. And I definitely felt that growing up too, but I think it's about harnessing those feelings and those experiences into action, or into something positive, into a catalyst to change people's minds and the way they think about disability and difference. And I remember this discrimination and this ableism really from a very young age. And there's one story that I always sort of remember. And I was about 7 or 8 years old. I grew up a competitive dancer, and every dance class I had, maybe once a week, we would go to McDonald's after dance class, because what kid didn't love McDonald's?
Why not?
Yes. So we were at McDonald's. I remember we had just gotten our food. We had sat down. It was pretty late at night at this point. I was with my mom and my brother, and I was sitting eating with my mom. My brother goes into the play place, and he loved jungle gyms. Still does. If you ask him, still does. So he was in the play place, and all of a sudden we started to hear just this commotion coming from the play place. And it turned out that there were two older boys, and they towered over Michael, and they were screaming at him, talk, why can't you talk? Cornering him like into the jungle gym. I remember being very confused, very angry. I had never experienced anything like that before, and really without hesitation, I ran up into the play place. I grabbed my brother, and as soon as I knew it, we had exited the restaurant. Before we had exited, the restaurant was empty, as I mentioned, and there was one man who we identified to be the boy's father, and he just sat there. He just sat there eating his Big Mac while there's an instance of bullying, outright bullying unfolding because of my brother's neurotype, because of the fact that he was non-vocal. And that's just something that's always going to stick with me. Of course, it's something that causes you to grow up quickly. It's a moment that angers you and causes you to think, but it's brought me here. It's brought my family stronger. Unfortunately, that wasn't an isolated incident, and there were hundreds more throughout the course of my brother's life, but I think it inspires action. So